So let's go back to that shift I talked about earlier, when the left started to leave me behind. And what I feel like really happened is that the people who were fighting for these cultural changes, for gay marriage to become mainstream within society, to increase access to abortions, and all these other social issues which took center stage over the last decade, had won their fight. And just like the proverbial dog who catches the car, they didn't know what to do once they had it. And their first instinct was to keep fighting, even if the things they were fighting against were very minor or potentially manufactured in the first place. All that they had in their toolbox was a hammer, and you know what they say about people who only have hammers: everything looks like a nail. So in this post-cultural victory era, who were the people that were next on the hit list? Well, it seems like they ended up being people like me, people who were on their side the whole time. And if you told me I would be in this position 5 years ago, I would have said you're crazy. But here we are today. However, what I realize now is that the battlefield, I guess you could say, is far more complicated than I had originally thought. Back then, that is 2 years ago now, I thought that Gamergate was the war to be won. But now I understand that Gamergate is just a battle in a larger war. And what this war is about is what the soul of the left and the right is going to be for the foreseeable future. And it's clear now that both the left and the right are fighting amongst themselves, but not necessarily focused on fighting each other, because the issues that they're going to fight one another on still aren't very clear, because there's currently a lot of overlap between certain sections of both the left and the right. So now, instead of there being two clearly defined large camps that, broadly speaking, bring together people of like-minded political ideologies, it feels like there are 4 camps now. So broadly speaking, what do these 4 camps look like? Well, in a broad sense, they look like the 4 squares of the political compass. And for those of you who don't know, the political compass is a very famous test that you use to define yourself in the political spectrum. So you take this quiz and it's got 20 or 30 questions, and when you're done, it places you on a continuum on this compass. And there are 2 sides. There's a social policy side and a economic policy side, I guess you could say. So on the economic side, it's divided between left and right. And then on the social policy side, it's divided between authoritarian and libertarian. So on this test, you can score in one of 4 corners. You can score on the top left corner, which means you scored high in left-leaning economic policies and high in authoritarian social policies, or you can score low on the authoritarian side and be a left-leaning libertarian. And then, of course, on the right side, it's reversed. There's the authoritarian right and the libertarian right. And these, broadly speaking, define our 4 camps. We have the authoritarian left, the libertarian left, the authoritarian right, and the libertarian right. And for me personally, I score very highly in the libertarian left category. And what's really strange is that I feel like I get along better with people who score in the libertarian right category than people who score highly on the authoritarian left category. But let's put this into more concrete terms. Who exactly are the authoritarian left? And these people are easy to identify. They are what are often called the social justice warriors, the third wave feminists, the hardcore PC crowd, whatever you want to call them. For the most part, you probably understand who I'm talking about here. And while I felt like the left used to be the section of the political spectrum that had reason and logic and freedom on its side, now it seems like this isn't the case, as the authoritarian left has risen to be the face of the left wing, potentially across the world, definitely here in North America. What it seems like happened here is that the left won the cultural wars, essentially. They, quote-unquote, defeated the authoritarian right, who, to me, is represented very much so by the Evangelicals, the traditional Republican Party establishment, but somehow by doing this, they got poisoned in their victory and started to take some of the authoritarian trappings of the authoritarian right and told people how they could live their lives, what they should do, how they should think, what they can and cannot say, what's acceptable, quote-unquote, in society as a whole. As well, they abandoned the idea of defending the, I guess you could say, constitutional ideals that define Western civilization. For example, they abandoned the legal principles in which this country stands on, and the authoritarian right did that long ago by advocating for things such as torture, for not giving people who are deemed as terrorists fair trials, essentially deeming them guilty via accusation. And when the right wing did it, I always stood against and denounced this practice. But now people on the left are doing the exact same thing, just for people who are accused of different crimes. These crimes being crimes of sexual assault. So people on the left are now saying that those who are accused of sexual assault crimes don't deserve the same due process as those convicted of other crimes. Yet not realizing, it seems, that they spent years denouncing the right for doing the exact same things of those accused of terrorist acts. I, for one, believe wholeheartedly in the rule of law, and I think if you've been listening for this long, you understand that I believe that no matter what anyone is accused of, they deserve a fair trial, and they deserve the presumption of innocence until proven guilty. And what's really interesting is I think that rank-and-file conservatives, I'm not sure how rank-and-file conservatives feel in the United States and other countries, but at least here in Canada, they are beginning to understand that there's an opening for them. That the way to a renewed conservative movement is becoming clearer, and they're already taking steps to go down that path. And that future is within the libertarian movement. And I understood this when a friend of mine who a year or two ago would have definitely been part of that authoritarian right looked at me and said, I know where we went wrong. As conservatives, I know where we went wrong. We adopted the mantle of authoritarianism. People don't like authoritarianism. We have to once again embrace the ideas of individual freedom and stand by them in an ideologically consistent way. And then he says to me, we don't need authoritarianism. The left clearly wants it, and they can have it. And I think if you're a conservative, you can very easily come up with a compelling argument for the libertarian right. And if they can do that, I think if the authoritarian left does become the entrenched orthodoxy of people who are left-leaning, then they're in serious trouble moving into the future. Because guys like me who are on the libertarian left are feeling more and more like we don't have a home. At least that's the way I'm feeling right now, is I'm becoming more alienated from my traditional party base. I talked about it a little bit in the last podcast, how I'm inching closer and closer to leaving the NDP because I see these authoritarian seeds being planted in the party and now starting to bear fruit. But it's even worse in the Liberal Party of Canada. So it's not like I can up and join them either. And this orthodoxy that's forming on the left is becoming an us versus them mentality. This idea that if you don't subscribe to our worldview, then we don't want you, we don't need you, and you're the enemy. And that's something I have no tolerance for. So if the authoritarian left is going to continue alienating the libertarian left, and I could see this happening in the United States right now with, I think, Hillary Clinton representing the authoritarian left and Bernie Sanders representing the libertarian left, the gulf between them is growing only wider and wider. And if it gets too wide that it's impossible to reconcile these two sides, what happens? Well, if you're a libertarian left-leaning guy like I am, you have one of two choices. You could either make your own party, or you can join another group. And I think it's possible for someone on the libertarian right to make a convincing enough argument to bring large portions of those libertarian left-leaning people over to their side. And I do think the vice versa would also be true. I think a strong left-leaning libertarian could bring over those right-leaning libertarians. But if I were to make a guess at which side was going to first try and co-opt the other, it would be the right trying to co-opt the left. And to me, these are the only two camps in our four-camp society that we're living in now that could conceivably join together at this point. It's clear that the libertarian right doesn't want anything to do with the authoritarian right anymore. Again, those are represented by the GOP establishment, which is definitely on its death rows now. And if the authoritarian left doesn't want anything to do with the libertarian right, well, that leaves those two camps joining forces out of the equation, and I highly doubt the two authoritarian sides would ever consider coming together. So that leaves the two libertarian sides, both of whom seem to be looking for change, looking for a new path forward. And if these two sides could somehow combine themselves, I think they'd be a very formidable political force.